Hello everyone. Okay, so the next program in chapter 5 is how much insurance. Alright, so many financial experts advise that property owners should insure their homes or buildings for at least 80% of the amount it would cost them to replace the structure. Write a program that asks the user to enter the replacement cost of a building and then displays the minimum amount of insurance he or she should buy for the property. Okay, so basically, financial experts are advising property owners to insure their homes for at least 80% of the amount it will cost them to replace the structure. Okay, so if we know how much it will cost them to replace the structure, they should insure their homes for 80% of that amount. So it says write a program that asks the user to enter the replacement cost. Okay, how much it would cost them to replace the amount. To replace the building. How much it would cost them to replace the building. And then display the minimum amount of insurance. Now experts advises, or financial experts advising them to insure their homes for 80% of the amount it would cost them to replace the structure. Okay, but then the user is going to tell us the replacement cost, and we are going to calculate 80% of that, and that's how much at least they should insure their homes for. Okay, that's how I understand the question, and it makes sense. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to create functions for that. We're going to create functions to ask the user to enter their replacement cost, how much it would basically cost them to replace the building, and we're going to create a function to calculate the minimum amount of insurance. Okay, basically the minimum amount of insurance they should buy for the property. All right, so let's do just that. First, let's go ahead and create a function that's going to ask the user for the replacement cost of the building, because the program said over here, the question said write a program that asks the user to enter the replacement cost of a building over here. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's define a function called ask for replacement cost. Okay, so ask for replacement cost is not going to accept in any argument, so I'm not going to go ahead and define any parameters. But in the function, it's going to go ahead and ask the user to enter the replacement cost of a building. So I'm going to use an input function to ask the user for the replacement cost. Now the input function basically takes in one argument, or takes an argument which is basically what is going to be displayed to the user, the question or the statement that's going to be displayed, the label that's going to be displayed to the user. And the label I want to display to the user is please enter the replacement cost of your building. Okay, so now this is going to be displayed to the user. Some kind of text box is going to pop up and allow the user to type in a response. Whatever the user types is going to be returned as a string. Now over here, it's asking the user to enter the replacement cost. Now the user is very likely to type in a number. Now the cost is money. It can be $25.20 or $50.80 or $1,000. It's going to be a number, but by default the input function always returns a string. By default, the input function always returns a string. Even if the user types in a number over here, the input function is going to go ahead and return a string. But we can't use strings the way we want to use it in this program. We need numbers so we can use it in calculations, for example. We need that number for calculations. So because the input function always returns a string, we need to basically convert whatever is being returned by the input function to a number. In this case, a float, because the user can type in $25.27 or $2,000.50. Okay, so there's going to be a decimal in there. So we need to go ahead and convert it to a float so that we can use it in calculations. So let's go ahead and convert whatever the user types into a float by calling the float function surrounding everything that the user has typed with parentheses. So basically we are converting everything that the user has typed over here to a float. And once we do that, we need a place to store it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a variable called, now this is going to be the replacement cost of the building. So I'm going to create a variable called replacement cost. That's how much it's going to cost them to replace their buildings. Now over here, I have exceeded the this line here. I don't know if you can see it, but this line is like a guideline for me to not exceed 80 characters on a line. It's a Python standard to try to keep 80 characters on a line. So I'm going to try to keep with that. So I want to go ahead and break this line into two. Now I'm going to break it somewhere around here. What I want to do is I want to basically close the string here, concatenate it with the beginning of the next string, and then break it somewhere here. Before you break any line in Python, you have to type in the backslash and then hit enter. So now I've broken it to two lines, but it's the same line though. Nothing has changed. Once I have the replacement cost, what I want to do is go ahead and return it. Return the replacement cost, so that whatever statement that called this function is going to receive the replacement cost as a result. Okay, so now this function is going to go ahead and ask for the replacement cost. We need to create another function though. The next thing we have to do is basically display the minimum amount of insurance he or she should buy for the property. We have to go ahead and calculate the minimum amount of insurance he or she has to buy for the property. Now the minimum amount of insurance, now over here the question said, many financial experts advise that property owners should insure their homes for or buildings for at least 80% of the amount it will cost to replace the structure. 80% of the replacement cost. So if we can calculate 80% of the replacement cost, that's going to be the minimum amount of insurance they should buy. Okay, so let's go ahead and define a function called calculate minimum insurance. So I'm going to call it calculate minimum insurance. And calculate minimum insurance is going to need the replacement cost so that it can calculate 80% of that. So it's going to need as a parameter. Okay, it's going to basically require the user, whoever called this function, to pass in an argument. So I'm going to go ahead and define a parameter. I'm going to call it replacement cost. And once the user types in the replacement cost, I want to go ahead and calculate the minimum insurance. So I'm going to calculate, which is basically 80% of that. Now 80%, when you punch it in the calculator, okay, 80 divided by 80% is the same as 80 divided by 100. If you punch in 80 divided by 100 in the calculator, you get 0.8. So 0.8 is the same as 80%, right? So now this is just to show you. Now we know this. We can go ahead and use 0.8 in the code. Now just in case we didn't know, for some reason we didn't know this value, how to calculate it, we can go ahead and basically type in 80% in the program to calculate it. So we can say in the function we want to go ahead and calculate 80% of the replacement cost. So we can say 80. We know 80% is the same as 80 divided by 100, right? So we can say 80 divided by 100. Okay. Now we want this calculation to take effect first. So I'm going to go ahead and surround it with parentheses. So 80%, okay, which is basically going to give us 0.8. But let's just do the calculation in the program. Okay. So 80% off. Now you can type, or you can use the multiplication sign as off. You can read it as off. So 80% off replacement cost. Okay, 80% of replacement cost is going to be our minimum insurance. Okay, so minimum, I'm going to go ahead and create a variable minimum. We need a place to start, so I'm going to create a variable minimum insurance and store the result of 80% of replacement cost in minimum insurance. That's going to be our minimum insurance. Once we have the minimum insurance, we want to go ahead and return it. Return minimum insurance. So that whatever statement that called this function is going to have, or is going to receive this minimum insurance as a result. So now we have two functions here. Now we are done. If you think about it, we are done with the functions, not the program itself. We have asked the user to enter the replacement cost of the building. We have a function for that. Okay, we haven't asked the user yet, but we have a function that's going to do that, and we have a function that's going to basically calculate and display the minimum amount of insurance he or she should buy for the property. All we have to do now is to call the functions and basically write the program by using the function. So I'm going to define a main method. The main method is basically the function that is going to call every other function. That's where we're going to write our program. It's the function that we should call when the program starts. The first function that we should call when the program starts, and any other function that needs to be called, any other statements that needs to run should be put in main. It's like the main method, the main function. That's the first function that's supposed to be run, or that's supposed to run when the program starts. So that's basically write our program there. Although when you don't define the main function and you call these methods in here, it's still going to run. Okay, although it's still going to run. It's good practice to create the, or it's a good thing to create the main method and call everything here in main. Okay, so now in main, that's where we're going to write our program. What we want to do first is ask for the replacement cost. So I'm going to go ahead and call this method, ask for replacement cost here. It doesn't accept any arguments, so I don't. It doesn't accept any arguments, so I'm not going to pass in any arguments, right? So, but again, it returns the replacement cost. It's going to ask the user to type in the replacement cost, and it returns it. So when it returns it, I need a place to store it in main. So I'm going to go ahead and define a variable in main called replacement cost, so that replacement cost can receive whatever value that's being returned from the ask for replacement cost function. Now it doesn't matter that this replacement cost is the same as is the same name as the replacement cost in main. Once they are in different functions, they are considered different. This function doesn't see what's going on in this function, and this function doesn't see what's going on in this function. These are considered different functions, different variables in different functions, although they have the same name. They are like twins. They are not the same person, but they look identical, but they don't see each other. They are considered different because they're only working. This is only working in this function, and this is only working in this function. So replacement cost is going to store what is returned from the ask for replacement cost function, and it will be stored here. Okay, it will be stored here. And then once we have the replacement cost, we want to go ahead and calculate the minimum insurance. Now the minimum insurance needs the replacement cost, which we have here, so we can pass it in as an argument. So now let's go ahead and calculate the minimum insurance by calling the calculate minimum insurance function. We know the calculate minimum insurance function takes in an argument, which is the replacement cost, and we have it here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and paste it here. So now we have provided the argument that is needed for the calculate minimum insurance function to work. Once it calculates the minimum insurance, now remember the calculate minimum insurance function returns the minimum insurance. So we need a variable or a place to store it, to store the returned value. So I'm going to go ahead and create a minimum insurance variable in main, which is going to hold whatever is being returned from the calculate minimum insurance function, and store it here. Okay. All right. So let's see. Yes. So we've asked for the replacement cost and stored it here, and we've calculated the minimum insurance and stored it in minimum insurance. The next thing we have to do is just display it. Okay. So it just says, and then displays the minimum amount of insurance he or she should buy for the property. Since this chapter is all about functions, let's go ahead and define a function that's going to print out the details. Okay, so let's define a function called print details, and print details is going to need some arguments. I'm going to go ahead and define some parameters. It's going to basically need these two things, these two values, the replacement cost and the minimum insurance, to be able to print them out. That's all it's doing. It's not returning anything, it's just printing them out. So print details is going to need a replacement cost, and it's also going to need the minimum insurance. And then once it has these two values, all it's going to do is print it out. Okay, so I'm going to basically print out these values that is going to be given to the print details as argument. So the first thing I want to basically create a message and say it's going to let's see, we can just create a message, any customized message, and say that you should pay. We can just say financial experts advise that you should insure your house financial expert advice that you should insure your house for. And that's going to be one argument. I'm going to pass into the print function. I'm going to pass in arguments into the print function to be displayed. So that's one argument, right? So financial experts advice that you should insure your house for. That's one argument. I'm going to put a comma and paste in or type in the second argument. Okay, so you should insure your house for. Now I have the minimum insurance here. So that's what I want to display. So the advice that you should insure your house for, minimum insurance is what I want to display. That's going to be the second argument I'm passing in there. But I want it also formatted. Don't worry about exceeding this line. I will fix it. I want it also formatted to in a certain way. Now the format function takes in two arguments. It takes in what you want to format and how you want it formatted. And that goes in double quotations. Now, because the minimum insurance is going to be a value, a monetary value, it's going to have decimals in there, possibly, like let's say, $200.50. I want it formatted as a float. It's basically a float. So what is going to basically be formatted now is a float. So I'm going to type in an F to represent the float. I want it formatted as a float. I also want it formatted to 2 decimal places. I'm going to type in 0.2 in front of the F. And that's the precision. If I wanted it formatted to 4 decimal places, I would say 0.4. I want it formatted to 2 decimal places, I'm going to say 0.2. The precision goes in front of the F of the font. Sorry, I said the font of the format. Of the type. Yes, the type. And since it's going to be a monetary value, I want it to be able to go ahead and put commas where necessary. If it's 1 million, I want it to display as 1, 000, 000. If it's 5,000, I want it to be displayed as 5, 000. So I'm going to go ahead and put a comma before the precision, before the type. Now I'm putting it here, and it's going to automatically do that. It's going to automatically put commas where necessary. I also want a $sign in front of the amount, so I'm going to put that here. So it's going to say financial experts advise that you should insure your house for this amount. Okay. Let's see. So it's going to go ahead and actually over here, instead of separating it as 2 separate arguments, since these things this thing can be one, I'm going to go ahead and concatenate. I'm concatenating. Hold on. I'm concatenating this whole string. Okay, this whole string to the formatted version of minimum insurance. Now the format function returns a string, so this interpreter wouldn't have any problem concatenating a string to a string. Okay, so now let's finish our string. Now because we've already exceeded a line, let's go ahead and break it somewhere here. I'm going to go ahead and, before you break any line in Python, okay, I'm going to go ahead and break it somewhere here. But before you break any line in Python, you type in the backslash and hit enter. Okay, so now let's continue. Financial experts advise that you should insure your house for this amount. And then let's concatenate it with a string and say, because it will cost you because that's I'm just trying to make this reasonable, because that's 80%, I guess. 80%, I guess. We can just go ahead and hard type it in here. 80%. We can do that. Or we can do something else. If it doesn't display right, we'll fix it. Okay, because this could be a problem, but I think it will display right. Okay, so because that's 80% off your replacement cost. Okay, replacement cost. Because that's 80% of the replacement cost of the replacement cost of your building. which is, now I'm going to go ahead and concatenate it with the formatted version. Now I run out of space here, so I'm going to go ahead and break it somewhere here. I'm going to close the string, concatenate it with the beginning of the string, and break it somewhere here. Before you break it, you type in the backslash, hit enter. So let's continue. Okay, so which replacement cost of your building, which is the formatted version of the replacement cost. Now I want to format the replacement cost. I want it formatted again, the same thing as a float to 2 decimal places. Put commas where necessary, and put a $sign in front of it. And let's break this somewhere here by putting a backslash before we hit enter and break it. Okay, so now this print details is going to take the replacement cost, the minimum insurance, and then print out these details. Now once we've calculated, we have the replacement cost, or once we have the replacement cost, and once we've calculated the minimum insurance, we want to go ahead and print the details and the print details function. So let's go ahead and let's call the print details function. It's going to need a replacement cost, which we have stored here. So I'm going to pass it in as an argument, and it's also going to need the minimum insurance, which we have stored here. So I'm going to also pass that in as an argument, and the print details is basically going to print out these details for us, given these two arguments. Now once we're done, in order to have the stuff in main run, now remember main is a function that's defined. It hasn't been called, so none of this is going to work or run if you don't call it. So let's go ahead and now call the main method, and the main method is going to basically call these other methods defined up here. So now we're done. Let's try to run it and see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and save this where I save the Python programs in the desktop. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm supposed to delete this. Let's go ahead and do that now. Just a second. That's different. Okay, yeah, that's it. Okay. All right. So let's save this here as how much insurance.py. Before that, let's go ahead and create a folder for it. Call it how much insurance. And then save this as how much insurance.py. So let's see what happens. Okay, no, this is okay. That was the previous program. All right, now it's running this program. So we can see. Let's just put a colon here so we can see where we are typing it. All right, so let's run it again. All right, so please enter the replacement cost of your building. I'm going to type in 100. I'm just testing it out, but I'm just saying $100, right? So 80% of that should be the insurance I should buy, right? I'll insure it for 80% of the replacement cost. So if it's going to cost me $100 to replace it, now this is the message we're displaying. It says, did I type final? Oh, financial. I'll run this again. So okay, so financial experts advise that you should insure your house for $80 because that's 80% of the replacement cost of your building, which is $100. So we can see that it's working. You can try another value to see. $125,000. So let's run that. Financial expert advise that you should insure your house for $100,000 because that's 80% of the replacement cost of your building, which is $125,000. So based on the numbers in this question, based on the description, this is what is expected of us. I'm very positive on that. So as far as this question is concerned, we're done. But I want to put a space. Also, we can go ahead and break this line into two somewhere. We can break it. Okay. So in the print function, because it's too long, we can break it in two. So let's work on it. Let's work on breaking it in two first. Somewhere around here, because around the because, let's go ahead and put a new line character there, like this. So now this new line character, well, I don't need a space after that. So this new line character, I need a space here too. No, let me just go and do that. All right, so this new line character, when the interpreter sees this \n, together, that's the new line character. When the interpreter sees that, it's going to take the position from where it's at the moment. See, right after the because, where it's at, it's going to take the position from where it's at to the next line. So anything that comes after that is going to be displayed on that next line. That's what the new line character does. It breaks that line to the next line. So anything that comes after it is displayed on that next line. Now you can try that and see. So let's say 50. There we can see that's working. I want to create a new line also after basically after it's asked the user to type in the replacement cost, and then before it displays the details. So I can also do that by, after I displays the question over here, I can go ahead and create a new line character here, or even before it displays this financial this message, I can go ahead and put a new line character here, run it, type in a value, and we can see we have a new line character. So the cursor was here, or the position was here, but because it saw the new line character before the financial experts, it took the the cursor was here already. So let's go ahead and take this back and run it. This was how it was before. So let's just do this. Oops. What did I do? Okay, so the cursor was here, right here. After this, the cursor was right here. After the question display, the cursor was right here. Not the cursor per se, the position was right here. Now, when it saw the new line character, I'm going to type it here. When it sees the new line character, it's going to take the position to the next line here, where it is right here. So anything that comes after it, the financial experts advise, all of that, anything that comes after that new line character is going to start displaying from here, because the cursor was moved from here to here. Anything that comes after that is going to be displayed from here going. And that's why we had that extra new line character. So that's one way to do it. So when we do this, we saw that it worked. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it, let me just go ahead and remove this. Another way to do it is to just call the print function. Now, if you call the print function this way and you type in something and you try to run the program and you type in something, it's going to, oops, something happened here. What happened? Let me just undo this. Well, let me run it again and see what it said. Okay. Okay. Over here, I think it was a value error. Let me just try and see what happened. Again, I didn't look. Yeah, it was a value error. Now, we haven't got into exceptions yet, but it's a value error. Basically, it's expecting a number, but we type in a string over here. So it's finding a hard time converting the string to a float over here. So it could not convert the string to a float. It could not convert the string to a float. That's why. Yeah, we'll fix it. We haven't got into exceptions yet. Exceptions is in chapter 6. Once we get there, we'll fix this. We'll have a way to fix this. But for now, we should try and type in a number. Okay. So let's enter, let's say 4, 5, 6. So over here, that's what I wanted to say. Another way to create a new line is when you call the print function and you tell it to print this, it's going to go ahead and print it for you, just like you've asked it to. But by default, the print function always takes the position from where it's at to the next line. By default, the print function always ends with a new line character. It takes the position from where it's at the moment. Once it prints this, okay, it's going to end it with a new line character, meaning it's going to put the position from where it's at right now to the next line. Okay, so from where it's at right now to the next line. So anything that comes after it, all the financial expert, that whole line is displayed on that next line. Now, it's going to first of all print whatever I've told it to print, and by default, that's how it works. It takes the cursor or the position from where it's at to the next line. Anything that comes after that is displayed on that next line. the one way to simulate that new line we wanted is to basically call the print function and pass in nothing. So basically you're telling the print function to print nothing. So it's going to print nothing. Instead of this, it's going to go ahead and print nothing on this line. But by default, the print function always ends with a new line character, meaning by default, once it prints nothing over here, the case will be somewhere here. See, but by default, the print function ends with a new line character, meaning it takes the position from where it's at to the next line here. So anything that comes after it, which is the financial experts over here, is going to be displayed from here going. So now calling the print function, typing in nothing, is basically creating a new line here for you. So when we run this, that's also another way to create a new line character. So when I type in 67, we can see that there's a new line over here created. But by default, the print function takes the position from where it's at to the next line here, and anything that comes after that print function, after this print function, is displayed on the new line here. Okay, so that's another way. You can either stick with this one or you can stick with a new line character here. So that's two ways to do that. Okay, so the program works. If you have any questions, please comment down below and I'll do everything to respond to them. Thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time with the next program. All right, bye-bye.